So my uncle is a Carmelite priest, meaning he is a member of one of the Catholic Church's religious orders. His is called the Brothers of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Mount Carmel, but for short we call them Carmelites. In fact, two of my uncle's sisters also belonged to that religious order. They were Carmelite sisters, but now deceased. Anyway, when I was a child, I was always fascinated by the way they dressed, putting on their brown habits with a large rosary hanging on the side. However, the thing that always interested me the most was the way my uncle and his sisters were called. This is because I often heard them being called by two different names. Their closest relatives and friends called them using one name, and then other people or those priests and nuns that belonged to the same religious order called them using a different name. For example, we all called my Carmelite uncle Uncle Wiesław, but everybody else would call him Sylvan. Back then when I was a child I didn't understand this, so one day I asked my uncle priest, "Why do we call you Wiesław, but others call you Sylvan?" Then my uncle explained to me that he was baptized as Wiesław, and all his relatives and friends know him by this name. However, when he entered the religious order, the Carmelites, he had to choose another name, a new name. And that is because this new name symbolized a new person. By becoming a Carmelite priest, my uncle was called to dedicate his life to Christ. He had to leave his former life behind and begin a new life, with a new name which he chose to be Sylvan. Many other religious orders and communities still practice this. You are being called by God to a new life, a life dedicated to Christ, so it is good for you to choose a new name. I really like that. But this meaningful practice is not reserved to some priests, nuns, or religious brothers. When you were first baptized, you also received a new name, maybe even two names. Why? For the same reason. You became a new creation, a holy person without sin. You became a member of God's family of believers. That's why you were given your name. Then when you were confirmed, when you made another important step in your life, again you were asked to choose a new name, another name. And that name, even if nobody calls you by that name, means that you decided to follow Christ, to follow His commandments, to becoming new person, holy person. Today we celebrate the feast day of the two great apostles, one who was with Jesus from the beginning, St. Peter, and the other one who never met Jesus. More than that, he was a Jewish Pharisee who was persecuting early Christians and wanted to wipe them away, St. Paul. Two very different persons with one thing in common. They both became new in Christ, and they both became the greatest saints for our church. They both struggled with their own doubts and imperfections. St. Peter, after denying knowing Jesus, changed his life completely and died for the Lord. And St. Paul, a great sinner, left his former way of living and became a humble servant of Jesus, also dying for him. But there is one more thing they both have in common. I almost forgot. They both changed their names. They changed their lives and then changed their names. From Simon to Peter. From Saul to Paul. See, when you meet Jesus, when you experience His presence in your life, you can't be the same person anymore. You must change. You must become a new creation, a new person, a better person, a holy person. Each time you come to Mass, each time you receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist, and each time when you listen to His words, you can't remain the same person. See, you can't come to church and live it as if nothing happened, because you have experienced something most powerful. You experienced what Peter and Paul experienced, a living God, a God who wants you to change your life, who wants you to change, to be His disciples. No, you don't need to choose a new name each time you leave the Holy Mass, but you must choose a holier way of living your life. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. So let's go to work, and God bless you.